All right. No, I'm good, thanks. Okay. My name's Boone. I'm a WordPress developer. I do mostly Buddypress stuff. I'm going to talk to you about WordPress 3.0 and Multisite. What is Multisite? So it's a couple different things. It means that you can have independent. Well, let me back up for a second and take away that bullet point. So forget you saw that. Multisite is really a way for you to have independent blogs on a single installation of WordPress. Meaning a single installation of the WordPress software. You've only got one copy of the system files on your server, but it's serving multiple blogs. So what good does that do you? Well, it lets each one of your users have use an independent theme. So one person could be using Kubrick, one person could be using 2010, one person could be using Atahualpa, or however you say that. And they can all be using them separately, and they'll all have different URLs. They can have independent plugins. So one person might have some C forms activated over here, and this person might have contact form 7. One of them might have Buddypress installed. You can have independent users, which is to say that you can have independent roles. So somebody might be an author on one of the blogs in the system, but they will not be an author on another blog in the system. And so they can even though they're on a single installation of WordPress, it's not as if everything is just shared in one pool. You can, on a very sort of discrete basis, you can divide things up. But benefits, you have a shared user database. So that's different from this, because this means you can have blog-specific roles. I might be an author on blog 1, but have no role whatsoever on blog 2, so I can't even see the dashboard, or I'm just a contributor, or just a subscriber. But everything is pulling from one database, which means that when I log in with my password, that session will persist. So I can go and visit all of my different dashboards. Maybe I have 5 blogs in the system. I don't have to log in over and over again because it all comes out of one database. And when you start talking about multi-site or multi-user specific functionality, like something like Buddypress, which pulls information from all over your entire installation, including different blogs, then it's really cool to have a shared user database because those things can kind of work together. And shared software. So this is the big benefit of this, that if you're doing this for clients or something like that, let's say, instead of having to have 50 different instances of WordPress, and then when WordPress 3.0 comes out, you have to go through each one and upgrade them, and then you have to upgrade each plugin on each installation. Here you've got one set of files, and it's serving all of these different blogs, and they all act like different sites. They can even have different domain names, but they are running off that one piece of software. So it's like a dream come true from a sysadmin standpoint. Who cares? Why would I want this? Schools. So this is my background. I work in instructional technology, and I do development for the City University of New York. So it's great for that. I mean, you can think about, for instance, I run an installation at my school that has like 1,000 people on it, and it's got different students will sign up for a blog for a particular class. So let's say I'm in a History 101 class, so I might have a History 101 blog, and each one of my classmates has their own History 101 blog, and it's a very powerful thing where each class could share a blog, yet it would all be on the same installation, so students could kind of have everything in one spot, but still have their different classes in different places. Very cool. Personal infrastructure, this one's kind of neat. So I have a bunch of different websites, just to give you an example, personal stuff. Like I have my main blog. I have a website where I take pictures of funny vandalism and make fun of them. I have what else do I have? I have some other stupid websites. So I have a website where I talk about pizza. I mean, like a bunch of different websites. And they are, I'm getting married in 2 weeks, so I have a wedding website. Thank you. I did it. Finally. Anyway, all of these, I have all of these websites, and they're all running on WordPress, but I have them all on an instance of WordPress Multi-User. The visitors don't know that they're all running, they don't even know that they're related on some of them, but from my point of view, it's so much easier to handle. So that's a really great thing. That's a really great use case for this. Yeah.
What if you want them to know they're related but have very different ones because it's different kinds of content?
Then I would probably use the same theme on each one, or I would use similar themes. And there are various sorts of multi-site or multi-user specific plugins that allow you to sort of pull information from across all of the sites. So Buddypress is the one I keep talking about, but Buddypress is a plugin. It's like a social networking layer, but that will put a bar across the top of your screen that goes across every single blog on the installation and makes reference to the logged in user. And so there's actually a drop-down that says, what other blogs is this person involved in on this installation? Or what are some of the, you could have a widget, what are the most recent posts from across the entire installation? That's a cool one to have at schools, for instance. So you could do that. It's just that in theory, you don't have to do that. So, yeah.
Does it solve the problem on WordPress MU that if you want to have distinctly different domains for one site versus another site, that when you log on, it shows up with whatever the original domain was?
You can do that with WordPress Multi-User, and the same solution works for WordPress Multi-Site 3.0. There's a domain mapping plugin by Ron Rennick and Donako that will do it. And so that's what the domain mapping is for. It's maybe not the most obvious name, but domain mapping means that you can, and I'll talk about, it'll make more sense, I'll talk about that in a second and exactly what that means. So another use for multi-site is for clients, like I was saying before. You know, if you are hosting your clients' sites and you've got 50 of them, this just makes your life a ton easier. And there are lots of other use cases too, but it's a cool thing to be able to run multiple things. So what about
your upcoming marriage?
What's that?
How about your upcoming marriage? But does your wife, how are you going to put the two together?
Oh, our personal infrastructures?
Yeah.
She doesn't have much of one, so she keeps a blog about distance running, but it's inside of my personal infrastructure. So
it's already part. Okay. So.
It's already. I've absorbed her. Yeah. But she has her own domain name, so you wouldn't know just by visiting it. Okay, so what about MU? So let's just a little bit of history here. MU stands for multi-user, as in WordPress Multi-User. WordPress Multi-User has been around for, I don't know, like 2-3 years or something like that. And the way that it's historically worked, the way that WordPress Multi-User development has worked, is that WordPress development has kind of trudged on. And when WordPress releases a point release, let's say 2.7, then this guy Donaka in Ireland would pull a couple of all-nighters, and like a week later he would release the WPMU version 2.7. So it was always lagging behind, and it was, like Steve was saying before, it had a very small amount of attention paid to it as compared to the rest of WordPress, which made sense in a way because, I mean, it's not as if you had to entirely rewrite WordPress in order to be WordPress Multi-User. It is a little bit of a shell around it, as Steve said, but it did take something away from it. And so WordPress Multi-User at times has been a little bit buggy and a little bit of a resource hog. But in any case, that's going away. And this is really, along with menus and custom post types, this is the big thing in version 3.0 of WordPress. The distinction between WordPress Multi-User and WordPress Single, or WordPress Vanilla, as it's sometimes called in the MU world, is going away. Which is to say that you don't have to download a different piece of software if you want to use multi-site. It used to be that you had to download it, go to a different link and download a different zip file or a tarball if you wanted to install multi-user, but that's not the case anymore. It's one single piece of software. You just have to flick on multi-user. So what are the differences between WordPress Multi-User and WordPress Multi-Site? Well, there isn't really any difference at all. I mean, for the most part, the functionality is the same. I think one of the goals of the merge, the merge between WordPress Multi-User and WordPress was to just get the merge working before we start worrying about overhauling Multi-User. So Multi-User is basically the same as it always was. There's a few terminology changes. So here you have what used to be called individual blogs that were part of a big site. So an installation was called a site, and these were called blogs. And then this is supposed to be a picture of me looking kind of scary. But then the person who was in charge of the site was called the site admin. This changes now. Check this out. Keynote, man. The future. So the future is called MS for multi-site. Or you might also see it called WordPress Network. It's called Network when we actually install it and look on the back end. But it's the same structure. The structure hasn't changed at all. Really, conceptually, it's the exact same thing, except these are no longer called blogs, they're called sites. And what, yeah, you like that?
Multi-user,
yeah.
WordPress has multiple users.
Yeah. WordPress Multi-User never made sense, right? Because even on regular WordPress, you could always have as many users as you wanted to. So the whole terminology thing is totally messed up. But now, what used to be called sites, in other words, an entire installation, is now going to be called networks. What used to be called a site admin is now called a super admin. So same thing, same structure, and basically the same functions are involved in doing all of this. Some function names have changed. There used to be a function called isSiteAdmin to test to see whether the current logged in user is the site-wide admin, and now it's called isSuperAdmin. And there are little changes like that, but for the most part, the functionality and the concept remains exactly the same between multi-user and multi-site. That makes sense? So you all have a sense of what WordPress multi-user does. Let's look at it. Just so I can give you a sense of what you'll see when you look at an activated WordPress multi-user blog. This is called Bernice. All of my dev environments have women's names and they're in alphabetical order. It helps me to differentiate. So I've already activated on Bernice.
What's your wife's name?
Rebecca. It'll be a while before I get to her. They all have like kind of old ladies' names, so I probably won't use Rebecca. Now, I've already activated. We're going to go through the activation process. How do you activate network sites in a minute? But first, I wanted to just show you what it looked like. For those of you who haven't used multi-user in the past, for those of you who have, how many have, by the way? How many people have used multi-user? Okay, a good number of you. So this will look basically the same, except up here you'll notice instead of site admin, it says super admin. So that's the first difference that those of you who are new will see, that there is a super admin thing up here right above the dashboard. So the reason I'm seeing that is because I am the super admin. If a regular user were logged in here, they would see exactly what you see when you look at a normal WordPress dashboard, with the exception that they would see the word My Sites here. My Sites indicates that a single user in the WordPress database can have multiple sites in the entire network. Let me show you what I mean. Yeah, Jeremy.
And super admin is not the same as an admin on an individual site. So each of the sites in here, like on WordPress.com, you're the admin of your blog. But the super admin is a special one that has control over the whole site. Which is why the old name was really annoying, because site admin did not mean anything that the administrator role on any given blog didn't already mean. Right? Like, site admin was like, what? That was always confusing to me because I was already the site admin on a non-MU install.
Well, I mean, it's because site was a technical term.
Yeah.
Site meant like something different from site in the normal terminology. But now I think the idea is that this is a little bit closer to our normal use of the word site. When I talk about my WordPress site, I mean my blog. I don't necessarily mean my network of sites that is running on a single installation of WordPress, right? So it's just kind of a move toward a more, maybe less nonsensical terminology. So when I clicked on My Sites here, I see two different blogs. I have two blogs installed on the system. I can go to iRule, which is a different blog. I've installed a different theme here. This is the same installation. Sweet theme, huh? You'll see it automatically inserts this little the subtitle. Instead of saying just another WordPress blog or whatever it says on the basic one, it says just another Bernice Sites site, because it recognizes this is a Bernice site. So it's totally different. If I go to the back end here, this is the dashboard for iRule. It's boone.cool/bernice/rules, right? So this is a subdomain, or it's a subdirectory blog. This is totally independent. When I click on the posts here, these posts are totally separate from any posts anywhere else in the system. The same for the taxonomies. When I go to the tags are totally separate from anything else in the system. The categories are totally separate. The users are separate. All of these things are sandboxes unto themselves. That makes sense, right? Yeah.
If you make a custom post type on one site, does it carry over to all your other sites?
It depends where you create it. So here is, we could talk a little bit more in detail about this later, about the file structure of WordPress Multisite. But one of the things that happens when you activate WordPress Multisite is that you get a little bit more options about how you activate plugins. Instead of just activating a plugin or deactivating it, you can activate it on a single blog, or if you're the super admin, you can activate it network-wide.
That's awesome. So that comes native.
It comes native and it activates everywhere. There's a third option, which is to install it in MU plugins. Is it still called MU plugins?
That's folder.
Yeah, it's called MS plugins. Yeah. There's also a folder in WP content called MS plugins, and if you install something there, if you put a PHP file on there, it's automatically executed. It's like activating it site-wide, except it doesn't even show up. So if you define a custom post type in one of those places where it's activated site-wide, it will activate everywhere. But if you only do it in a functions.php that is relevant to only a single blog, it's a theme only used on one blog, then it will only activate there.
It goes by theme.
That's right. Yeah, please.
Question. let's say you have 3 WordPress blogs all independently up and running on their own domain names. You have irule.com, isoc.com, and
I have those sites. Don't be taking my sites.
and you know, I don't know, snowboarding, greatest thing on earth.com. How complex will it be to migrate all of those into?
It won't be pretty. I mean, it's not going to be very smooth. There's a couple ways to do it. One is that you can just do a regular WordPress export. So under Tools, there's an export function, and that just does like a an XML export. I don't actually know what format it is, but and then you could import it via the same function. That won't take all of your themes and other stuff with you, and it won't take probably some of your taxonomies. It won't take your users, for instance. You could also do database exports, but then you're going to have to be pretty careful because you have to know the structure of the WordPress Multisite database, which is a little bit different. Jeremy, do you have a better answer to that?
I do.
You do? Great. Yeah.
Import and export in 3.0 is killer. It will bring you to a separate screen that will let you map out the users, create new users if you need to right on the fly. I haven't dealt with tags yet because I'm really just not into them. Categories, it'll do categories for you. It is totally improved. I think it's totally getting rewritten, and I just don't think we do it very often, so we never come across it. But everything that was not really working before works now. Totally tried it.
So the users works better?
So upgrade each individual blog to 3.0 and then export them into
then,
is that what you're saying?
You don't have it. It's the import in 3.0 that kicks butt.
Just a couple of things, because it's not a database export. Like if you have a bunch of users, you need to create new passwords. Like none of the passwords are going to carry over. I'm not sure about custom taxonomies. I don't think custom taxonomies and custom stuff carries over.
It even downloads the attachments from the old installation and then uploads them to the new installation.
That's standard. That's been going on for a while.
That wasn't working for too long for me.
Yeah, it should. It should. So you are going to have an issue. I will tell you this: it's either going to be a plugin that comes out that converts it, or there's going to be somebody who opens up a shop that does it, because a lot of people are going to want to convert them over. It's not really pretty. What?
Does that. Like I asked him at WordCamp New York, how do you do that? And he's like, well, if someone hires me to do that, I have a bunch of database scripts that I run that takes care of it. And I was like, okay. Someone could write a plugin for that, and they could have already. Hopefully that happens. If you have a really simple site, then there's a good chance you can do this. If there's one user and you're using categories and tags, then you can do this to your heart's content. I have sites with 300 users that are the same users mixed up in 20 different sites. I don't know how the hell I can get that going. I'm going to have to wait for a really good plugin. But if you have simple sites, you can probably bring a bunch of them together relatively easily, especially if you can use the export-import system. If that is already working for you, then you're probably going to be okay. But there's a lot of scenarios where that doesn't work.
What about vice versa for client sites?
What do you mean?
Can you kind of client side out of the image?
Well, you can, it's the same answer. You would just export and then you would import into a single installation of WordPress if you wanted to get it out of the multi-site.
Yeah, you're right. The more plugins, the more custom stuff you have, the harder that's going to be.
Right.
That's an important consideration.
Yeah.
Even though as you go forward, you want the opposite. The opposite seems a lot more appealing than moving them out. But there's reasons why you want them separate too.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, if I have multiple sites on a network, can I designate sharing of posts among the sites or sharing of pages so when someone writes on one site, they could click to appear on another, or the other site could invite it to appear?
I have a half-written plugin in my sandbox that will do it, but it doesn't, not really easily. I mean, you could do it with a plugin like Feed WordPress, but then you're just kind of moving outside of the system. You could use some of the internal plugins. I mean, if you know how to write code, there are a lot of multi-site specific functions. There's one, for instance, called Switch to Blog. And when you switch to blog, what you're essentially doing is tricking WordPress into thinking that you're talking about a different blog for a second. And then you could write to that database as well, and then restore current blog, which is that you switch back to the original one. And so all of that is feasible in theory. None of it actually is in the WordPress user interface. So
they're not planning that.
Well, I doubt it. It's a pretty niche use, and so I don't think that it's not really a candidate for the core.
Have you seen the multi-blog? Is that what he's talking about? Multi-blog post plugin, where you can post on one blog and then.
Oh no, I haven't seen that. That's probably it then.
Yeah, that's it.
So there you go, multi-blog, multi-post.
Yeah, no, we have an MU install at my newspaper, and I just found this.
Hey guys, you guys want to. You can catch up afterwards.
Yeah. Let's talk about shop afterwards. Yeah, one more question and then I'm going to move on. Yeah, please.
So is it possible to have MS install, have multiple sites, have plugins for different sites, and you have a renegade plugin bring one site down, but the others will remain functioning? So
yes.
you have a problem having a plugin for one site.
Yeah. I mean, as long as the plugin, a plugin that's broken, let's say, that is missing a bracket, will only bring down a site where it's actually loaded. Okay. So that's a problem that we would like to avoid, so let's not even think about that. But yeah, in theory, they should operate separately.
Can you share taxonomies across multiple sites?
No, not easily. One way to do it that I can give you a link to a post that I wrote about this like a year or two ago, by using like a site-wide tags plugin that pulls everything and like aggregates all posts together. You can kind of hijack that, creates in the essence of a site-wide tags, and then you can pull those in your own dashboard, in the dashboard of any individual blog. So you can hack it, but it doesn't really do it by default. Yeah.
Sorry. So
no, go
this
ahead.
is not really ideal, like in the school situation.
Yeah.
Let's say you have like the history department, the science department, the art department.
Yeah.
It's not really ideal to create like a parent site that like pulls everything in and like posts the principal's message across all the. It's not really good for sharing between blogs. It's really for unique individual.
I'd say that's right. Yes. I mean, if what you want to do is really just sort of, if you want to share a bunch of information between sites that look different, then you should be using things like categories and theming those categories differently. This is really if you want things that are fundamentally independent with different users. Yeah, that's what I would say.
One plugin that would take care of that.
It comes out of the use cloud. Unique instance.
All right, guys, let's go through the vault. Let's just boom.
So here's the process of creating a new blog. I'm doing this in the back end, but you can also set this up so that users can do this via a front-end interface. It's similar to WP login.php. Site title, this is another great site. And then you can I'll enter my Gmail address, add site, and that's it. It's created again. So now when I go up here to sites, I can see that, or when I go to my sites, there's my other site, and it's got a brand new dashboard. So it's as easy as that. You can really rattle off these blogs if you want to. And like I said, your users can do it too. Up here to the super admin, there's a bunch of sort of site-wide settings that would be new to you if you haven't used WordPress Multi-User. So, or I'm sorry, network-wide settings. Here is like a list of all the blogs on my system. Here is a list of all the users on my system and the sites that they belong to. Here are the themes. So administrators can activate certain themes that are allowed to be used. For instance, you may have your central blog ID number 1, maybe like the home page, and you don't want your users to be using that theme on their pages because then it would make it look like it's actually the home page. So you could disable that theme after you've activated it on your own blog. That's a handy thing. It's also got a bunch of site-wide options that allow you to sort of set who gets to register. Maybe people can only existing users can create new blogs, and so on and so forth. It's got much more robust sort of registration filters. You can put in like email blacklists and stuff like that for registration. This is stuff that doesn't exist in WordPress single. Let's talk about how to turn it on. Yeah, please go ahead.
Do you still use subdomains?
Yes. So I have used. I'm glad you asked that. Actually, that's important. When I set this up, and you'll see in a second as I'm setting it up, I have a choice of either setting up as a subdomain installation or a subdirectory installation. And the difference is, what do I want the URLs of my children blog to be? The children's sites. Here I've chosen subdirectory, which is to say that my main domain is boone.cool. And then /Bernice, this is the root right here, /Bernice/rules, that's the name of the blog. That's the slug for the blog, and it is a subdirectory. The alternative is to have awesome.boone.cool, where awesome is the name of the blog. That's called a subdomain. And you have to choose that when you first set up Multisite, and you can't switch back. It's usually better to go with subdomains, but I don't on my local installations because it breaks things because I don't know how to set it up right. Okay. Let's talk about how to set it up.
Can you repeat what's the address will be with subdomains?
What's that?
Can you repeat which address will be with subdomains?
Yes. Subdomain awesome.boone.cool or awesome.google.com is a subdomain. Awesome.
So can you compare it with Berenice? Because you gave the example with Berenice, but it's a directory, so it makes sense for me.
Yeah, well, the other example would be boone.com/awesome.
Well, I think she's asking, it was boone.com/Bernice.
Well, that's because, I mean, don't pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. That's because I have boone.cool as my local host, and then I have a bunch of different installations of WordPress.
Yeah.
One's called Alice, one's called Bernice, one's called Chartreuse,
But
or
in
something
this
like
case,
that.
it would be rules.
Yeah, so this blog is called Rules. I have another one that's called This Is My Awesome New Blog that I just created. I have another one that's called just root / so it's Bernice, and that's the #1 blog. Those are subdirectories. Does that make sense?
And subdomain would be?
A subdomain would be something like.
With that example, though.
With that example, it would be something like this. I mean, it's not gonna work, but it would be something like awesome.boone.cool.
Or rules.boone.com Bernice, right?
But you can't
that doesn't really work.
rules.boone.com/Bernice. That's crazy.
That doesn't work. That doesn't work. Right. That's why it's confusing, right?
He would have organized the whole thing differently.
Yes, that's correct.
If you're doing domain mapping, does it matter?
Yes, if you're doing domain mapping and you're using the plugin that I talked about before that's written by Danaka and Ron Rennick, you have to make sure that you use subdomains. It's possible to do it with subdirectories, but I think that you have to use a different plugin for that. I haven't done this. I haven't done that particular thing in a while. It may be different now, but that's generally the case. Steve.
I think Ron also has his own plugin.
Yes,
and it can be used with. He told me it could be used with folders.
That's the one that I use. It's called It used to be called the Multi-Site Manager, and now it's called the Multi-Network Manager. But it's a great plugin. I think they ask $15 for it. I use it on my personal infrastructure, and I really like it. Those are great people. You should support them. Okay, let me quick. Yes, please ask a question. Then I'm going to set this up. Yes.
That's so that you can use your multi-site and use the subdomain and also subdirectory?
No, you can only use one or the other.
You can use both of them.
That's right. So you have to decide when you first set up multi-site whether you like the individual blog URLs to be a subdomain or to be subdirectories, and that is fine. You can't. It's all or nothing there.
Yeah. Just one really important thing I wanted to say about this before he sets it up. When you set up, if you're not going to do domain mapping, when you set up subdomains like this, Google will recognize this as a separate site as cool.boone.cool, something like that. If you set it up as folder boone.cool/awesome, then every one of them, Google recognizes it as one domain. So that's one of the, if you're not going to do domain mapping, that's something to really take into consideration. That's all I'm going to say.
I don't know anything about SEO because I'm an educator. I don't care about that kind of stuff. Okay, so let's show you how to set this up. I've already got this set up on Bernice. We're going to look at Charlene and see how you set it up. So here's the right now the canonical source, codex.wordpress.org create _ network. That's the canonical source. That will be constantly changing as all of this stuff gets finalized in 3.0. This is where to go. First step. Go to your WP config file where all of your database credentials and stuff like that are stored, and you put in the following line. Define WP allow multi-site true. Let's do that. All right, so I'm going to go into Charlene. You'd be doing this probably through an FTP editor or something like, or FTP clients or something like that, but I'm doing it on my local machine. Opening up wp-config.php. I'm going to scroll right down to the bottom just because that's where I want to put it so I can keep track of it. Or not. Let's try that again. I don't want this stuff. Define WP allow auto multi-site true. Save. I didn't make any mistake. Oh, those are curly quotes. That's not going to work. Okay.
Did you save it?
I saved it, yeah. So let's go to the back end of Charlene. That didn't come out right. Let's go look at at Charlene's dashboard. All right, it looks like I crashed it. I must have put some white space in here.
Don't put it at the bottom. Don't put it at the bottom. You need to put it above include WP settings.
Okay, thanks. That's funny, it worked before. Anyway, so, okay, now I'm going to go back to the back end of Charlene. And it looks the same here. Nothing has been activated yet because I haven't gone through the setup process. You'll notice right now I'm just seeing the normal WordPress dashboard. I don't see the super admin section. I'll go down underneath tools and then to network. And that's where I'm going to go through the setup process. So it's asking me to decide what I want to do. Create a network of WordPress sites. Welcome to the network installation process, blah, blah, blah. Now, first option, subdirectory install. Because I am installed in a directory called Charlene, it doesn't give me the option. I don't even have the option of doing subdomains. If you're doing this at a root domain, something like boone.com, then you will have the option of subdomains versus subdirectories. Choose carefully because this is something you can't really switch back on. Server address, that fills in automatically. You decide what you want your site, your network to be called. And remember why this is important, because the default tagline on every new blog will be just another Charlene Sites blog. So you should make that whatever is going to be descriptive of your site. And the admin email address.
So you can change those things.
You can change that stuff later. That's right. Okay, create a network of WordPress sites. So there's a couple things we need to do in order to enable the network. It's actually really easy though because it gives you all the code that you need. The first thing is that you need to create a blogs.dir directory in sites.charlene./wp content. Now the reason for this is that on a normal WordPress installation, all of the content that you upload through, let's say, the media editor or something like that, is stored in WP content upload, right? Yes. All right. But when you've got a lot of different blogs, all of that stuff is sequestered. It's all in its own directory, yeah. And that's what blogs.dir is. So inside of blogs.dir, you'll end up with a bunch of different folders called 1, 2, 4, 8, corresponding to the blog IDs of your individual blogs. So we need to create that. This isn't absolutely essential for the purposes of demonstration, but I'll do it anyway. Blogs.dir. Step 2, add the following to WP config. Just above the line that reads, "That's all. Stop editing. Happy blogging." Where is that? Here it is. Paste it in there. And finally, add the following to your htaccess file. Now, I think on my local installation, I probably don't have an htaccess file. As a matter of fact, I don't.
You do, you just can't see it.
Well, no, I have hidden files shown. It's just not showing. I should have it from installing WordPress.
Save permalinks.
Yeah. Oh, that's why, because I didn't do that. Yeah. In any case. So if you have an htaccess file, which you probably do, you would do this over again. I'm going to go ahead and just create one from scratch. We'll save this in Charlene. And call the file .htaccess. Once you complete these steps, your network is enabled and configured. You'll have to log in again. Click log in. There it goes. It's taken me here. If this worked, I should see the super admin menu up at the upper left. Yeah. It's waiting for boone.cool. You can see the server must be slow. Here it is, super admin. So that was it. There were really just a couple steps. I had to enable multi-site in my WP config. I had to go to Tools, Network, and follow the steps there, which were just a couple of copy and paste things. And then I've got my whole system here. And then to create new blogs, to create new sites, that's all located under the super admin menu. So that's a quick overview. What kinds of questions do you have about how multi-site works? Yeah.
Have you tried to upgrade from an existing, we were talking about earlier,
no.
Existing MU installation?
I haven't tried. I think that it's going to be, I've seen a couple tutorials of people who have been doing it. I'm going to have to do it soon because I'm going to have to upgrade production sites. It looks like it's pretty straightforward for the most part. There are going to have to be changes in your htaccess and your WP config in order to correspond to the new configuration settings. But for the most part, the database structure stays basically the same. All of the directory structure remains the same. So there will be relatively few changes. But the tutorials are already starting to come out, and we're still quite a few weeks away from 3.0. So there will be plenty of help out there on the web for you. Yeah, please.
If you have a Buddypress installation, is there a way to associate a member's blog with their activity hub place?
That should happen automatically. When a user creates a blog, when Buddypress is installed, that's automatically associated with them. If you install Buddypress after people have already started blogging, it will run a script that goes through every blog in the system and it associates it with the relevant authors. So that should happen automatically. If it's not happening, there's something messed up in your system and you'll have to run the script again.
So it'll just say so-and-so blogs.
Yep.
But they'll have a different subdirectory then.
Oh, it'll show up on their Buddypress profile. So it's just part of the metadata that's stored with their Buddypress profile. It's not really reflected in any special URL structure or anything like that. Yeah.
I have a website on single user, and I have Buddypress on a single user. Now I want to make this website global, and the users that are registered, if one of the users changes its place from New York to, let's say, Copenhagen, can he do so and then get the access to the site? Let's say if it's newyork.network.com and the user is of newyork.network.com, can he just change his profile and get into Copenhagen.network.com?
Okay, the question is, if you have a user who is already in your system and is already blogging, and you want to add that user to another blog, how do you do it? Well, you as the administrator generally have to do it, or the administrator for the blog that the person wants to join. So in the same way that if you're adding a user to your regular WordPress blog, you have to go in and you have to type in their email address and a username for them. It works the same way with WordPress Multi-User, except, or Multisite. You have to make sure that you type in the correct email address and stuff, otherwise it'll create a new user for that, but it's the same process.
It doesn't let you say this user though, which is really
which is really stupid, but I mean it would be really easy to write a UI that did that. So I imagine here's the thing about MS, because so many more people are going to have easy access to this, I think development for multi-sites in particular is really going to ramp up in a way that it hasn't before, because it's really been used by niche communities like education. So a lot of the tools that aren't there quite yet, I think are really going to be there in the next 6 months. Yeah, question way in the back. Yes, you.
Would you say this is perhaps the best way to create different RSS feeds for, like if you blog, you have different podcasts?
Yeah.
Would this be the best way to create different RSS feeds?
I wouldn't recommend it. I would recommend using the categories or tags in WordPress, because WordPress automatically creates RSS feeds associated with each of those taxonomies. Unless you're really doing something that has a totally different audience and is totally unconnected, and maybe you even have different authors, then this makes sense. But for something that is really conceptually close like that, I would just use categories and tags.
Go to the category link and add /feed at the end, and it will create an RSS feed for any category or tag.
Right. Yeah.
In terms of domain mapping, suppose I wanted to instead have separate unique domains. Would I then have to go to my domains registrar and play with the name records and then do some associating?
So the way that it works, there's 2 steps. First is that you have to get this domain mapping plugin on your WordPress multi-site installation. That's going to handle all of the sort of funny HT-access stuff that you would otherwise have to do. That does all the redirection once the traffic gets to your server. You'll also have to go to your domain registrar, and I guess the easiest way to do it is just to park the new domain at the IP address of your installation. You can also do stuff with, like, I don't really know how that stuff works, like A records and stuff. I don't really know. I don't know a lot about that stuff. But parking the domain works fine. So all you're doing is saying all traffic to this domain has to go to this server. The domain mapping plugin takes care of the rest of it. Yeah.
One last question. She had a question about content sharing. Is it possible to have one of the sites in the system send out feeds and have the other ones subscribe to them?
You can do that, but you can't really do it through the native API of WordPress. What I mean is that you can do it with RSS.
Yeah.
So you can do it with RSS in the same way that you would do it with an RSS feed from Blogger or from the New York Times. You use like a plugin like Feed WordPress, and Feed WordPress allows you to create new posts from RSS feeds automatically. So that's how I would do something like that. There's no way to do it within the system except for what Jeff was talking about before. It's Jeff, right? Sorry. Yeah. The multi-post, you called it? Yeah, so I'll have to look into that.
I wasn't sure if that was a feed thing or...
Right. No, I don't know. I'll have to look at it. I mean, that should exist. It doesn't exist right now, but it should.
But also, a really simple way of doing it, just like, there's a default widget, actually, that comes with WordPress if your theme is widgetized, that allows you to place like the titles of RSS feeds in your sidebar, let's just say. Yeah. So if you wanted a sidebar of all, what's going on in my blog network, you could easily pull all it's a simple way of doing it. pull all the RSS feeds from every other blog, stick it in that widget, and now we just need to show up there, and they're all linked.
And I should mention again this site-wide tags plugin. This is a plugin that essentially creates an extra blog on your multi-site installation, which acts like an aggregator. So anytime somebody posts a post on any blog on the entire installation, a copy of that post goes into the aggregator. Now, what good does that do you? Well, now that you have all those things in one place, you can use an RSS feed. You can get an RSS feed of everything on the entire site. You can make a tag cloud of everything on the entire site because you have all these tags over here that have been collected by all of these aggregated posts. So that's a powerful way. Instead of, say, cutting and pasting each RSS feed into a widget, which could be hard if you have hundreds of sites, this site-wide tags thing can be really amazing for getting like a sort of overview of what's happening on your site.
You mean network-wide?
On your network, I'm sorry. It's called site-wide tags. I'm sure it will have to be changed to network-wide tags. Yes, sorry, nightmare. Yeah.
The thing that I think escaped from the demonstration a little bit was that first blog you create is in the root.
Yes.
Because your root was Charlene.
That's right.
So when you install Multisite on a server, your first blog is not deletable, correct? Is that still correct?
That's correct, yeah.
So your first blog is not deletable, and it's going to fall in the root directory where you can't put it in a folder.
Right. I mean, this, for instance, is the big production installation that I manage. Commons.gc.cuny.edu is the name of the roots blog ID number 1. When WordPress was first installed, the domain was pointed toward this directory. There are other blogs in subdomains of this. For instance, cunypi.commons.qc.edu. So this will lead us to a subdomain blog. This is a WordPress multi-user installation, and it is totally separate in the ways that I was just showing you. This blog is deletable. You can do whatever you want with it. You can reconfigure it. But that main blog, commons.gc.cuny.edu, cannot be moved.
Have you ever archived a blog, and like what are those summarily, like what are those extra functions good for? I never used it.
What do you mean archived a blog?
I know, you can archive a blog.
I guess I don't know what that means. You like export it, you mean?
It must mean like disable posting, but don't delete content.
Oh, that's probably all it is. Oh, you mean like in the site, in the super admin menu? Yeah. You know, I've never really played around with that. I don't know what it does. That's probably exactly what it is, though. It just kind of makes it unpostable.
Can you go back to the site that you
Sure.
main page?
Yeah, the main page is commons.gc.cuny.edu.
So this is, in a way, it's the parent blog, but it's not really.
Right.
It's not really like pulling in any cumulative posts. Like, notice anything different? That's not posts.
No, it's not. We are pulling in different posts, but we're doing it with things like, well, it's all screwed up. It has something to do with my resolution. It's bad to bring up a live site and realize that it's totally screwed up. Oh, there it is. Okay, weird. So it is pulling in recent blog posts from all around the system, but all of this stuff is just content on the main blog. It's just themed in a certain way. So this is the only stuff that's coming from a blog other than commons.gc.cuny.edu.
Members, that's being pulled out of the group? Or no, are you?
Well, it gets to be a little complicated because this is a Buddypress plugin. This happens to be pulling members out of the shared user database, WP_users. It's shared by all of the blogs on all of the sites on the entire network. That's what makes it WordPress Multi-Site, because it has a shared user database. So this kind of concept is really, it's not pulling from any blog at all. It's pulling from the user database, which is shared between all blogs.
But that's Buddypress. And without Buddypress, you'd have no way of showing these users on the main blog.
No easy way.
Because they'd have where would the links go?
That's right, where would the links go? It might go to like a category, like an author tag on a specific, yeah, I'm not sure how you would do it. But you couldn't do this. This widget exists because of Buddypress. Right.
Where does the blogs link go that's at the top?
Well, this is part of Buddypress, so this is not really, I shouldn't have brought this up because it's a Buddypress installation.
That's good. I have a question on it.
Buddypress actually, it makes a directory, like a catalog of all the blogs on your system. So, because remember what I said about WordPress Multi-Site, it really, by default, functions as a way for you to have a bunch of different blogs that aren't really connected to each other in any meaningful way. Buddypress really brings them back together, and it brings them together under a single thematic umbrella. Yeah, please.
Is there a network-wide equivalent to a supercache, or do you do it on a per site?
Yeah, WP Supercache will more or less work. with Word. I mean, I say more or less because it has funny issues with Buddypress, but it works fine with WordPress Multi-Site. Yeah, it's the same principle. Yeah, please.
So, I just one thing I don't fully understand is, so there's a single database for all of those different websites?
Yeah.
It's one database.
Well, it's one database, but I'll show you what it looks like. For those of you who don't know anything about databases, you can just ignore all this. But what happens is that in your normal WordPress database, there's something like 15 tables created automatically. I'm going to go in and look at Bernice because she's got a couple different ones. So you can see that we have WP2 comment meta, WP2 content. I'm only seeing a partial list of the tables here, but then we have W3 options and so on and so forth. So instead of just having WP posts, WP options, WP comments, and stuff like that, instead you have this other WP_X_blank. And so you have a different set of post tables for each blog on the system. That's how they're able to sort of use the core WordPress API and get away with it. It was sort of a hack to begin with.
You have a lot less collisions than you would if it was all in one thing, but the users table is shared.
Correct.
And
there's a couple of them.
User meta.
User meta is shared.
User terms. Is terms shared?
No. Those are the core. Those are the blog. That's blog one.
Oh, blog one.
Between blogs.
What's that?
Between blogs, you guys have.
Nothing is. These are shared down here. The users and user meta are the only things that are shared between blogs. Yes.
Question about the database. Can you have separate databases per site, particularly for the content, but share the users?
It's possible. Yeah.
That's a separate. You could do that before without MS or MU. If you just want that, there's hacks that do that.
What I'm afraid of is I want to have say in my network 10 sites. I want to know that each site has a database someplace, so if something happens to one, everything.
What you'd want to do the recommended solution would be to do what WordPress.com does and create a network of databases with HyperDB, which spreads them all out. It'll spread this one big shared database out all equally, but that has almost the same effect as spreading each one individually, except that, it's.
I mean, that's really that's a hardware issue. I mean, if you're having trouble because your server can't handle so many database lookups. Because look, I mean, MySQL wasn't really designed to look at 75,000 different tables. It was meant to go in and look through the rows, right?
Yeah. So one site is enough to often bring it down. Right. HyperDB will help you even with your individual sites by spreading each individual site on several places.
Right. Yeah. So there are a lot of different ways to set up what you're looking for. But I mean, if what you're worried about is losing things because something goes wrong in one place, I think your real problem is that you need to just have good backup in place. I don't think that moving things in different databases is really going to make that big of a difference in the long run.
Simply one of the sites in the network, I simply want to export the database out because I want to move it out of the network.
So you could either do the internal WordPress export, which is really for posts and comments and stuff, or you could go in here and just export the 12 tables that belong to it, and then you might have to do some renaming in order to get it to work in the new single database, but that's all possible. Because the internal structure of these tables is not any different than it is when multi-site is not enabled.
Except for users and user meta. So you have all the users from all your blogs on this new exported blogs. You have to delete all the ones from the other sites.
Are there performance or security issues related to the fact that, I mean, theoretically, right, I mean, this could get really much more enormous than a typical blog, single blog would. So I just wonder, does it come up as an issue?
I don't know about security. I don't think there are really the security issues since you're really just using the core WordPress functions for most of the stuff that would be relevant to security issues. But performance, yes. I mean, and it has to do with this enormous amount of database information that's created, and that's why things like HyperDB and some of these other solutions have emerged as a way of sort of spreading out the lookup load. And of course, you're going to have to worry about things like RAM. I mean, you can't install WordPress Multisite and let's say Buddypress and expect to have good performance on shared hosting, for instance. It's just not going to work because you're multiplying your requirements every time somebody joins the site. So yeah, there's certainly performance considerations. I don't think that there's nothing inherent to multi-site that makes it a worse performer. It's just that as you're getting more users and there's just more activity in the database, so it's going to happen. Yeah.
One site activates the data backup. The data database manager, what does it back up?
Well, it depends how your database manager works. If you're using like a WordPress plugin to do that, and if it works on WP cron, then you would probably hook it to your main blog. You activate it on your main blog. And I have never actually looked at how those plugins work, but I assume they just do an entire database dump.
No, I'm saying if
they use
one
MySQL
activated,
dump.
not the main one.
Right.
If one of the external ones activated.
Oh.
It would depend on the plugin. That's another plugin. The main plugin, Wpdp Backup, what it does by default is the ones it interprets as your specific blogs, tables that you want, and then you can check off other ones that you want to include. For example, extra plugin tables. You could say, yes, I want these next-gen gallery ones. So in this case, I'm not sure if it's smart. I think that plugin would probably be set up if it's MU to just say, you probably want everything.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So that's helpful. So you'll have to experiment with different backup plugins and see what happens. Yeah.
Or just do it on the server level and back up the whole thing. Like
Yeah.
when you're at this point.
Yeah, I mean, if you're running a big installation, you really should know how to run a cron job that does a MySQL dump or something like that, because that's a lot more reliable.
But individual purposes.
Is there a way to back up just one blog?
Yes.
Oh.
That would be complicated. You could probably do it with the XML backup. Wpdb Backup, I think, will also do the XML backups for you. And then that's the export system. So you can do the export backup, so if something goes wrong, at least you can start from somewhere. Though, yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, you can still choose the tables.
Sure. But your regular user's not going to have data. A regular user's not going to have access to this, so they're going to need a UI.
How do you create a segregated backup? It's like, that's the same thing as exporting it. Like if you have the export solved, you run the export once a day and hold on to it.
Yeah. Maybe just passing in the ID, you know,
yeah. So
some kind of backup function.
Yeah.
I don't. A plugin could easily be, if it doesn't exist yet, it could be written. So there's a project for you for the weekend, right? Yes.
If you have separate databases, you can turn off comments on one site and.
You don't even need separate databases. I mean, all of these blogs, they all have different option tables. Option tables is where all of the settings for a blog is. You want to turn off comments, you want to turn off trackbacks, you want all comments, all posts older than 30 days to have their comments closed. All of that stuff is stored on a blog by blog basis. So that works in exactly the same way. From the regular user's point of view, they might not even know that you're running a WordPress multi-site installation. The only way they would know is if they looked up at that, they saw My Sites underneath the dashboard menu. That's the only difference from their point of view. Other questions? Yes?
So would it be easy for me to update my WordPress single user 2.9 with Buddypress to WordPress 3.0?
I think so. I have done a couple upgrades like that, and it works
with
really,
the process
really smoothly.
You just showed.
Yes. Well, I didn't show you an upgrade process because I started with a version of 3.0. So you'll have to do whatever upgrade process you would normally do. And
so I don't have to go through what currently the multi-user you need to do with the server settings, etc.
Well, you'll need to activate multi-site after if you want to use multi-site, you'll have to activate that and go through the process that I went through after you've upgraded to 3.0.
No, but currently when you download multi-user, you need it suggests you do some changes with the server, etc.
Well, you still have to make sure that you have things like mod rewrite installed. But I mean, you probably already have that stuff if you are running pretty permalinks. I mean, you probably don't have to make big changes to your server. You may have to make changes to your DNS if you want subdomains to work. That's really the only new thing introduced by WordPress multi-site over the regular installation. So your server configuration shouldn't be too bad. Okay, people are kind of, yeah. Do we want to, Steve?
Yes.
Should we maybe break, because I think people are kind of.
Okay, let's take a break, and then if he wants to.
I'm going to stick around, so if you want to talk, we can talk.
Cool. All right. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.